Hello, welcome. Did you know I like summoners? You probably did. But I've found myself playing Evokers more for a while now. This isn't just because Evokers are great, but also because Evokers are better summoners than summoners. Yeah, they really are. Not in absolute terms, of course, but this is only half serious to begin with. Now, let's define summoning conceptually. Minions, as in physical minions, minion-esque spells in terms of shape and function, and minion-based spells. Practically then, such summonings fulfill specific roles: damage, tanking, support, and utility. So it's usually tempting to simplify Hellgate summonings down to 3 demons fulfilling these functions, elementals adding flair and damage, and classifying everything else as arcane/evocation territory. But to me that hardly seems to be the case. Evokers do have spells that fall within one or more of these groups, ones that are actually so efficient that, given the above definition anyway, the current meta Evoker builds play more like summoners. So, let's compare. First things first, what minion options do Evokers have, or which spells could be considered minions, or which ones could thematically fit summoners? That's Spectral Serpents, Tempest, Wall of Bone, and Ember. Then Venom Armor, Swarm, and Spectral Curse. Not all of these can be compared back to back, of course, but let's try to go through the basics. Number 1, Spectral Serpents versus Warper. So, Evokers got Spectral Serpents in the TC. I've touched on this before, so don't let me drag this one on too long. Serpents are fantastic, which I have no doubt most Evokers will agree with. They can be positioned at will, since one can target where they spawn. They can stack. They deal great damage, which is also affected by Foki and minion damage. They don't collide with other options, they have high attack rate, and they are invincible. Compare this to the Warper now. He is driven by AI, which can be iffy. He doesn't stack, though that's normal. He deals great damage, but is only affected by plus minion damage and commands. He blocks other demon options, including the Reaper. He has a decent attack rate, and he's oh so fragile. Now, I know that this isn't a strictly apples to apples comparison, but you get the idea. When the closest thing summoners get to this mob of invincible frenzied snakes is an almost literally glass cannon of a bat demon, serpents are a minion spell worth drooling over. Number 2, Tempest versus Elementals. This might be a head scratcher, but here's my reasoning behind it. Conceptually, Tempest is by all means a minion. It's a thundercloud that deals damage. Constant damage does come from other spells as well, but Tempest is shaped as a minion. Building on this, the concept of Tempest as a spell is constant damage independent from the user, so it can be cast and forgotten about as an additional layer of damage. Out of 5 elementals, 3 fall exactly within this definition. The concept of damage dealing elementals is to provide damage independent from the user. Cast and forgotten about, an additional layer of damage. So why does Tempest work and elementals don't? Tempest has this going for it. It can be cast and forgotten about, it can stack, it's affected by Foki, including plus use rate affixes. It works against all target types, it deals great damage, and it's invincible. Elementals on the flip side suffer from the following. They need a close eye on them to be recast when needed. They can stack, but only if power, cooldowns, and distance allow it, and if they survive to. They are affected only by plus minion damage in terms of damage. They are supposedly designed to work best against specific target types, for example storm against flying and so forth. They deal mediocre damage at best, and they are oh so fragile. Again, not a strictly apples to apples comparison, but it should be one with some merit. Now, what else is there? Yes. Wall of Bone versus Carnagor. Yes, this is probably the least valid comparison, but hear me out. Still, Wall of Bone is not without design perks. It can be positioned at will, since one can target where it spawns. It is affected by plus minion HP, it doesn't collide with other options. It's expendable, as it can be resummoned at will and is only bound by its CD, and it blocks the path of enemies, providing a tactical advantage when it works. In comparison, the Carnagor shines even less. Yes, even less than an inanimate wall. It's driven by AI, which can be iffy. It's affected by plus minion HP and armor as well as commands. It blocks other demon options. It needs to be resummoned, which costs much power and the long summon animation of which immobilizes the player, and it can block the path of enemies and tank them when it works, but taunting requires a command, which has a terrible duration to cooldown ratio. It immobilizes the Carnagor and thus makes it only slightly more useless than it is, and it doesn't work in any relevant context, since some enemies resist taunts and bosses are immune to it. Now, I don't actually believe Wall of Bone is stellar by all means, and it's not comparable to a tank minion either. What I'm saying though is that as an evoker I wouldn't mind getting Wall of Bone if I build a bone-based evoker, but I'd never get the Carnagor in any summoner build. One is a fun little toolbox option that can provide some breathing room and a tactical advantage. The other is a useless minion that prevents using actually useful ones. Sorry, old friend. Now, the Ember. The Ember is a bit of a curious situation. It occupies the evoker's main minion slot, not unlike summoner demons. However, it's by all means a minor one. It's a buffed fire elemental after all. Still though, it's great for what it is. It's a distraction for enemies, a 1-point wonder that can actually become quite sturdy for a minor demon. I do almost always get 1 point in it for leveling, yes, but let's try to keep that a secret. So, in the context of the class, it's actually quite great. It has little defense, but the class boasts tremendous damage. In contrast, summoner minions are fragile, weak, and frankly unsustainable, when the class can simply not back them up, or otherwise make up for it. So, speaking of unsustainability, here comes the part where I'll probably get some accusations of bias. Venom Armor and Swarm. My loves of old, where time so cruel has torn us apart. Are those summoner appropriate spells? As much as Global and my personal tastes would say yes, not absolutely so. But still, why would they be fit for summoners? Both are literally supernatural toxic bugs that are summoned to be used, so they do fit thematically. It's also worth noting that, unlike most evoker spells, Swarm belongs to the Mind Power group, which is the group that Demon Commands belong to. Both could be of practical use, since summoners got Dark Form to spearhead their conceptual direction in the TC, which is melee. Venom Armor could provide defense, which melee range pretty much necessitates, as well as a reliable way to trigger Bronze Curse, since it strikes back when attacked, which, coincidentally, Flagship did try to emulate with Abandoned Fists. Now, Swarm could provide an AoE option which the class severely lacks. It would be a means of dealing personal damage, which, outside of Dark Form and guns, the class lacks. A way to actually make use of Foki outside of Dark Form, which the class mostly lacks. A reliable way to apply SFX, which the class lacks despite having Elemental Drain in its skill set. And a logical way to make use of Blood Shards, which the class lacks outside of Dark Form, for which Rip Shards were also designed. So there's that. Lastly, Spectral Curse. Oh, but why does this spell fit summoners, I hear you say? It's a debuff which summoners lack and could use, since apparently they were meant to be a support class or one of many different paths. It's a damage booster which the class could use, and it's a curse which Cabalists do tend to use. Alas, even when it could very reasonably be shared, not unlike Brom's Curse, this wonderful curse was only given to Evokers. And it's this toolbox as a whole that pretty much sealed Evokers as better summoners than summoners. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this half-serious analysis. Thank you in advance for any and all thoughts you may have to share on the matter, and of course, thank you for watching.